Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Law 2 of the 48 laws of power we shall be going over today. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Once again, I will make my weekly disclaimer each time I go through each law of this book. And that disclaimer is we're Muslims, firstly and foremostly, right? So some of the things that are written in this book will be in contradiction to what Islam teaches. Throw it against the wall, get rid of it. That's the first thing. Second thing, many of the things in this book are pure evil, pure outright evil. Take it and learn from it so that you know what to protect yourself from. And thirdly, once again, many of the things in this book will actually benefit you in your day-to-day life. In the least instance, you will at least be equipped with how to protect yourself from those who will take these laws and use them against you, who will take these principles and use them against you. At least you will know how to protect yourself. At least you will know what to protect yourself with. So, without further ado, we are going to get straight into it. Danur wa alaikum assalam. Danish, assalamu alaikum habibi. Daiba, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Daiba, I think I saw your comment on my video yesterday about setting up a Patreon for the ladies. I have put a poll on my Instagram because I've been repeatedly asked by the ladies to set up a Patreon tier for you ladies, for the sisters specifically. But I don't know what to make content for because I make content for men. So if you want a Patreon tier for the sisters, go to my Instagram at theredmahdi. You can see it there in this bit there, and comment on that poll. What type of content do you want to see? Because I'm not going to offer a service, take your money, and then not know what type of value to provide you with. I need to know what type of value I'm bringing to the people before I try to take their money from them. Okay. The Gator. Let's go. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Be wary of friends. They will betray you more quickly, for they are easily aroused to envy. Very important. Your friends are easily aroused to envy. When you're both broke together, it's okay. But if one of you suddenly starts to become very wealthy and successful whilst the other is still struggling, this will arouse a great deal of envy. Never mislead yourself, delude yourself into thinking that your success and subsequent happiness is shared by your friends equally. Very, very rare this is the case. Most of the time, your success only highlights their inadequacies, highlights their failure. So never make the mistake of thinking that your success is shared, the happiness that you have gained from your success is shared by everyone else. No, nonsense. But hire a former enemy and he will be more loyal than a friend because he has more to prove. In fact, you have more to fear from friends than from enemies. If you have no enemies, find a way to make them. Profound. Let's get into it. As you recall, as I mentioned last week, for those of you who are watching last week, the way that Robert Greene breaks down each law is he provides a transgression of the law, where someone from history transgressed the law, and then an observance of the law, where someone from history observed the law. Not always is there an observance, but usually there is a transgression. In the mid-9th century AD, a young man named Michael III assumed the throne of the Byzantine Empire. His mother, the Empress Theodora, had been banished to a nunnery, and her lover, Theoctistus, I hope I pronounced that correctly, had been murdered. At the head of the conspiracy to depose Theodora and enthrone Michael had been Michael's uncle, Bardas, a man of intelligence and ambition. Michael was now a young, inexperienced ruler, surrounded by intriguers, murderers, and profligates. In this time of peril, he needed someone he could trust as his counselor, and his thoughts turned to Basilius, his best friend. Remember that. Remember that throughout this entire story, Basilius is his best friend. Basilius had no experience whatsoever in government and politics. In fact, he was the head of the royal stables, but he had proven his love and gratitude time and again. They had met a few years before when Michael had been visiting the stables just as a wild horse got loose. Basilius, a young groom from peasant Macedonian stock, had saved Michael's life. The groom's strength and courage had impressed Michael, who immediately raised Basilius from the obscurity of being a horse trainer to the position of head of the stables. He loaded his friend with gifts and favors, and they became inseparable. I want you to remember that. He loaded Basilius with gifts and favors. Showered him with gifts and favors. Basilius was sent to the finest school in Byzantium, and the crude peasant became a cultured and sophisticated courtier. Now Michael was emperor and in need of someone loyal. Who could he better trust with the post of chamberlain and chief counselor than a young man who owed him everything? Basilius could be trained for the job, and Michael loved him like a brother, ignoring the advice of those who recommended the much more qualified Bardas. Michael chose his friend. Basilius learned well and was soon advising the emperor on all matters of state. The only problem seemed to be money. Basilius never had enough. Exposure to the splendor of Byzantine court life made him avaricious for the perks of power. Michael doubled, then tripled his salary, ennobled him, and married him off to his own mistress, Eudoxia Ingarina. Keeping such a trusted friend and advisor satisfied was worth any price. But more trouble was to come. Bardas was now the head of the army, and Basilius convinced Michael that the man was hopelessly ambitious. Under the illusion that he could control his nephew, Bardas had conspired to put him on the throne, and he could conspire again, this time to get rid of Michael and assume the crown himself. Basilius poured poison into Michael's ear until the emperor agreed to have his uncle murdered. During a great horse race, Basilius closed in on Bardas in the crowd and stabbed him to death. Soon after, Basilius asked that he replace Bardas. Now remember, Basilius is Michael's best friend, in case you're getting the two names confused. Bardas is the uncle of Michael. Basilius is Michael's best friend, and he is the focal point of this story. Soon after, Basilius asked that he replace Bardas as head of the army, where he could keep control of the realm and quell rebellion. This was granted. Now, Basilius's power and wealth only grew, and a few years later, Michael, in financial straits from his own extravagance, asked him to pay back some of the money he had borrowed over the years. To Michael's shock and astonishment, Basilius refused, with a look of such impudence that the emperor suddenly realized his predicament. The former stable boy had more money, more allies in the army and senate, and in the end, more power than the emperor himself. A few weeks later, after a night of heavy drinking, Michael awoke to find himself surrounded by soldiers. Basilius watched as they stabbed the emperor to death. Then, after proclaiming himself emperor, he rode his horse through the streets of Byzantium, brandishing the head of his former benefactor and best friend at the end of a long pike. That was his best friend. Interpretation. Michael III staked his future on the sense of gratitude he thought Basilius must feel for him. Surely Basilius would serve him. He owed the emperor his wealth, his education, and his position. Then, once Basilius was in power, anything he needed it was best to give to him, strengthening the bonds between the two men. It was only on the fateful day when the emperor saw that impudent smile on Basilius's face that he realized his deadly mistake. He had created a monster. He had allowed a man to see power up close, a man who then wanted more, who asked for anything and got it, who felt encumbered by the charity he had received, and simply did what many people do in such a situation. Now, before I continue that, let's just focus on this point here. He felt encumbered by the charity he had received. That charity his friend had given him, those favors his friend had bestowed upon him, Instead of him being grateful for it, he began to loathe Michael, to resent him, because he knew he had Michael to thank for all of his success, and that started to eat away at him. He could no longer consider himself a self-made man. No, instead, he knew that the reason for his success, or the primary reason for his success, was intimately connected to somebody else, not his own efforts. And that began to make him feel resentful towards Michael. If you think that by bestowing many gifts and favors upon your friends, or even your family, that they will feel indebted towards you, that indebtedness that they feel towards you is like a noose around their neck, and they will do anything to get rid of it. Anything. It's a burden. Have you ever been given a gift by someone? Someone's gotten you something really nice, and then you feel immediately, man, I need to get this guy something back. I need to buy something for him. Even like when your neighbors give you a plate of food. Have you ever received a plate of food from the neighbors? What do you do when you send the plate back? You make sure you put food on the plate when you send it back to the neighbors. Why? Because you're nice? You'd like to think so. No, it's nothing to do with that. It's because you are trying to relieve yourself of the burden of having received a gift. Yes, the burden of having received a gift. That's why you fill that plate up with food, usually a bit more, and send it back to them. Why? So that they can now have that indebtedness towards you. That's why you put a bit extra on. Gifts are oftentimes a burden upon the receiver. So never think as the gifter that you are doing them a favor and that they will hold you in high regard and can't wait to come to your aid. No, it's a burden. And I'm not saying not to gift, by the way. The Prophet said, tahabu, give gifts, you will create love between one another. But just remember that, especially if you think that you are doing it to gain favors back from that person, especially if that's your intention. Yeah, your intention is, I'm going to give him gifts just as Michael bestowed power and wealth to Basilius so that I can get favors from him in return. No, it's not going to happen. Give and forget about it. And that's it. Give and forget about it. A man who then wanted more, who asked for anything and got it, and who felt encumbered by the charity he had received, and simply did what many people do in such a situation. They forget the favors they have received and imagine they have earned their success by their own merits. Exactly what I just said. Basilius wanted to feel like he was a self-made man. It was an insult to him to think that the primary reason for his success was as a result of the actions of someone else. That was an insult to him. At Michael's moment of realization, he could still have saved his own life, but friendship and love blind every man to their interests. Nobody believes a friend can betray. Again, nobody believes a friend can betray. And Michael went on disbelieving until the day his head ended up on a pike. Yes. Famous quote by Voltaire. Lord, protect me from my friends. I can take care of my enemies. Whew, heavy. Now, I'm going to read to you. There's always stories in red on the sides that Robert Greene adds in. So I'm going to read you some of these tiny stories. To have a good enemy, choose a friend. He knows where to strike. Famous quote by Diane Duportier. Every time I bestow a vacant office, I make 100 discontented persons and one ingrate. Louis XIV. I can't remember. Someone told me what number XIV is last week. I think it's the 13th or the 14th or the 11th. I don't remember. Tell me again in the comments, guys. Every time I bestow a vacant office, let's just go over that. I make 100 discontented persons and one ingrate. Why? Because whenever Louis would bestow a vacant office to one of his courtiers, a vacancy is opened and he needs to fulfill that vacancy. There's 101 people going for that position, right? Only one of them can get it. So the one who gets it, we'll get to him afterwards. But the other 100 who didn't get it, now they're obviously discontented, right? They're upset they didn't get it. But what about the one who actually did get it? The one who got it, he becomes an ingrate. Why? He believes he deserves more. He believes he deserves more. It's like a lose-lose. Every time I bestow a vacant office, what was the wording? I make 100 discontented persons and 1 ingrate. Thus, for my own part, I have more than once been deceived by the person I loved most, and of whose love, above everyone else's, I have been most confident, so that I believe that it may be right to love and serve one person above all others, according to merit and worth, but never to trust so much in this tempting trap of friendship as to have cause to repent of it later on. Be careful with your friends. I was having this conversation with one of my kids the other week. She did something very nice for one of her friends, and I said to her, be careful. When it comes to your friends, be careful, because you might over-invest in your friends emotionally, financially, fiscally, and then one day they stab you in the back, or they just move on, and now you're upset. You're feeling hard done by because you over-invested. Be careful with your friends. Be careful. Be good to them, but understand the reality of friendship. It's fickle. It's fragile. Right. There are many who think, therefore, that a wise prince ought, when he has the chance, to foment astutely some enmity, so that by suppressing it he will augment his greatness. Princes, and especially new ones, have found more faith and more usefulness in those men whom at the beginning of their power they regarded with suspicion, than in those they at first confided in. Pandolfo Petrucci, Prince of Siena, governed his state more by those whom he suspected than by others. And we're going to get to that in a moment, how enemies can often prove more loyal allies than friends themselves. In fact, let's move on to the next now, to the observance of the law. For several centuries after the fall of the Han Dynasty, Chinese history followed the same pattern of violent and bloody coups. One after the other, army men would plot to kill a weak emperor, then would replace him on the dragon throne with a strong general. The general would start a new dynasty and crown himself emperor. To ensure his own survival, he would kill off his fellow generals. A few years later, however, the pattern would resume. New generals would rise up and assassinate him, or his sons in their turn. To be emperor of China was to be alone, surrounded by a pack of enemies. It was the least powerful, least secure position in the realm. In AD 959, General Chao Qiangyin became Emperor Sung. He knew the odds, the probability that within a year or two he would be murdered. How could he break the pattern? Soon after becoming emperor, Sung ordered a banquet to celebrate the new dynasty and invited the most powerful commanders in the army. After they had drunk much wine, he dismissed the guards and everybody else except the generals, who now feared he would murder them in one fell swoop. Instead, he addressed them. The whole day is spent in fear, and I am unhappy both at the table and in my bed. For which one of you does not dream of ascending the throne? I do not doubt your allegiance, but if by some chance your subordinates seeking wealth and position were to force the emperor's yellow robe upon you in turn, how could you refuse it? Louis XIV, Vegeta, appreciate it, thank you. Drunk and fearing for their lives, the generals proclaimed their innocence and their loyalty. But Sung had other ideas. The best way to pass one's days is in peaceful enjoyment of riches and honor. If you are willing to give up your commands, I am ready to provide you with fine estates, beautiful dwellings where you may take your pleasure with singers and girls at your companions. The astonished generals realized that instead of a life of anxiety and struggle, Sung was offering them riches and security. The next day, all of the generals tendered their resignations, and they retired as nobles to the estates that Sung bestowed on them. In one stroke, Sung turned a pack of friendly wolves who would likely have betrayed him into a group of docile lambs. Far from all power, over the next few years, Sung continued his campaign to secure his rule. In AD 971, King Liu of the Southern Han finally surrendered to him after years of rebellion. To Liu's astonishment, Sung gave him a rank in the imperial court. Now, let's just hang on this for a moment. The same guy that has been fighting Emperor Sung all of these years, instead of executing him, he gave him a rank. He honored him with a rank in his court. Let's continue the story. To Liu's astonishment, Sung gave him a rank in the imperial court and invited him to the palace to seal their newfound friendship with wine. As King Liu took the glass that Sung offered him, he hesitated, fearing it contained poison. "Your subjects' crimes certainly merit death," he cried out, "but I beg your majesty to spare your subject's life. Indeed, I dare not drink this wine." Emperor Sung laughed, took the glass from Liu, and swallowed it himself. There was no poison. From then on, Liu became his most trusted and loyal friend. His most trusted and loyal friend. At the time, China had splintered into many smaller kingdoms. When Qian Shu, the king of one of these, was defeated, Sung's ministers advised the emperor to lock this rebel up. They presented documents proving that he was still conspiring to kill Sung. When Qian Shu came to visit the emperor, however, and pay attention to this wisdom here, instead of locking him up, Sung honored him. He also gave him a package, which he told the former king to open only when he was halfway home. Qian Shu opened the bundle on his return journey and saw that it contained all the papers documenting his conspiracy. He realized that Sung knew of his murderous plans, yet had spared him nonetheless. This generosity won him over, and he too became one of Sung's most loyal vassals. Find a way to turn your enemies into your friends, because they will strive harder and go further for you once they realize how much mercy you've had upon them. Before I give you the interpretation, let's go through the super chat. Rashid Khuzaima, I appreciate this super chat, my brother, for $4.99 super chat. I love Brother Mahdi for the sake of Allah. May Allah give you all the good, my beloved brother. Rashid, Habibi, ahabbak Allah alladhi ahbabtana fih. May the one whose sake you love me for love you also. I much appreciate it, brother. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for the super chat. Okay, interpretation. A Chinese proverb compares friends to the jaws and teeth of a dangerous animal. If you are not careful, you will find them chewing you up. Emperor Sung knew the jaws he was passing between when he assumed the throne. His friends in the army would chew him up like meat. And if he somehow survived, his friends in the government would have him for supper. Emperor Sung would have no truck with friends. He bribed his fellow generals with splendid estates and kept them far away. This was a much better way to emasculate them than killing them, which would only have led other generals to seek vengeance. Let's talk about this for a second. One mistake that many dictators in the Arab world have made, Arab dictators have made, is in order to squash a rebellion, they think the quickest way to squash the rebellion is by killing all those who have initiated the rebellion in the first place, not realizing that them making martyrs out of those who have initiated this rebellion will only further inflame the rebellion. It will further inflame it and add fuel to that fire. Better to give them estates and singing girls and all the rest of it, just as Emperor Sung did, or whatever the equivalent would be today. Give the people entertainment. What do you think they do so well in the West here? You know what they do so well in the West? Come to my door. Imagine I'm the Prime Minister. I'm Boris. Please come to 10 Downing Street. Come to my door. Tell me how much you hate me. Tell me how much you can't stand. You know what? I'm gonna have a police escort for you as well, so that you're safe, so that nobody can touch you. Please come to my house, number 10 Downing Street, and insult me to high hell. You know why that's so smart? Because people actually feel like they've done something when they go out shouting on the streets. That's the danger with protests. I'm not going to get into whether it's halal, haram. I don't even know, frankly speaking, to be honest with you. But let's just talk about it from a psychological viewpoint. Whenever something atrocious happens in the world, we want to do something, right? And if we don't do something, we think, then, you know, I can't feel good about myself. I want to do something. So I'm going to go out onto the streets and protest and shout and rant and scream and so on and so forth. Please tell me, when has that ever worked? When did that ever work? Well, okay, whatever. You want to go and shout and scream and all the rest of it, fine. But do you know what the beauty of protests are for the one facilitating your protest? Is that Mr. Boris, Mr. Biden, these man them know that by the time you finish ranting and raving, you'll go home, put the telly on, watch the TV, watch the footy, watch the basketball, and forget about it all. And they can carry on plotting and planning in the background whilst you're sat at home thinking you did something. You did nothing, Habibi. Nothing at all. That's the intelligence and smartness of allowing the people to just rant and rave and even organizing protests for them. In the Arab world, they do the opposite. He did the equivalent of what emperors of old in China did. Squash the rebellion, kill the upstarts, kill them all. And that just further inflames the rebellion. Ilyas Muhandis, I appreciate the 999 super chat, my brother. Jazakallah khair. Learn to use what laws you can for good and learn the others so you can protect yourself from those that would invoke them. Use this book as a shield, not a sword. I love that. I absolutely love that. I absolutely love that. Jazakallah khair. Ali B, that's a really good. Use this book as a shield and not a sword. I appreciate that, bro. That's brilliant. Ali B, I've literally just bought one today, bro. I've literally just bought one today, as well as a. Actually, I've got a few surprises for you guys, inshallah. You're right. This mic is dead. I've got a new one coming, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. All right, let's carry on. I'm gonna read you a famous Sufi proverb. Okay, pick up a bee from kindness and learn the limits of kindness. Shall I say that again? Pick up a bee from kindness and learn the limits of kindness. Brilliant. Go try and pick up a bee. You want to help him, you know, the bees on the road. You want to learn the limits of kindness. Epic. Right, let's carry on. Instead of relying on friends, Sung used his enemies, one after the other, transforming them into far more reliable subjects. Whilst a friend expects more and more favors and seethes with jealousy, these former enemies expected nothing whilst they got everything. A man suddenly spared the guillotine is a grateful man indeed, and will go to the ends of the earth for the man who has pardoned him. Again, a man who has suddenly been spared the guillotine is a grateful man indeed. Understand where the emotions are now. Your friend is always expecting more favors from you, but your enemy expects nothing. So you give your enemy, you bestow favors upon your enemy, he will go to the ends of the earth to defend you. That's the beauty of having an enemy. A man suddenly spared the guillotine is a grateful man indeed, and will go to the ends of the earth for the man who has pardoned him. In time, these former enemies became Sung's most trusted friends, and Sung was finally able to break the pattern of coups, violence, and civil war. The Sung dynasty ruled China for more than 300 years after that. Amazing. In a speech Abraham Lincoln delivered at the height of the Civil War, and pay attention here, he referred to the Southerners as fellow human beings who were in error. An elderly lady chastised him for not calling them irreconcilable enemies who must be destroyed. Why, madam? Lincoln replied. Do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends? This is like wisdom on a whole nother level. Now, I understand there are some enemies that you cannot befriend at all. But if you can avoid spilling blood, and even better, you can have those enemies work on your behalf, spend from their resources on your behalf, so much the better. Why not? And remember, an enemy will always go further for you than a friend ever will. Men are more ready to repay an injury than a benefit because gratitude is a burden and revenge a pleasure. One more time for those of you who missed it at the back, and before I even say it again, 40 of you in here, please hit that like and sub the channel. Jazakumullah khair. Men are more ready to repay an injury than a benefit because gratitude is a burden. Gratitude is a burden. What did I tell you? When your neighbor gives you a plate of food and you know you need to return that plate back to them, you know you have to put food back on that plate before you send it back. You can't send that plate back empty. It's a burden. You feel burdened, you're stressed, worried. Have we got any food in the house, guys? Can someone go and buy something, please? Where are the chocolates that we brought? Who ate them? Come on, I told you. We've got to put food on the plate for the neighbors. Burden. Burden. Because gratitude is a burden and revenge a pleasure. Remember that. Adam Jallo, appreciate the $4.99 super chat, brother. Jazakallah khair. Salam, brother. Pay my dues for the immense value and time you are giving us. My man, I much appreciate it. Respect, Adam. Adama. Respect, brother. I appreciate it. Jazakallah khair. All right, let's carry on. Keys to power. It is natural to want to employ your friends when you find yourself in times of need. Pay attention here. This is very important. For those of you running businesses, if you have businesses and you are tempted to hire your friend because, you know, that's the right thing to do, right? And by the way, let me just check how many people we've got in here right now. We've got 45 of you in here right now. And we have 14 likes. 14 likes. Please get those likes up, guys. Jazakumullah khair. Hit that like button. It takes nothing from you. It's free. It is natural to want to employ your friends when you find yourself in times of need. The world is a harsh place, and your friends soften the harshness. Besides, you know them. Why depend on a stranger when you have a friend at hand? Makes sense, right? The problem is that you often do not know your friends as well as you imagine. Friends often agree on things in order to avoid an argument. Let me say that again. Friends often agree on things in order to avoid an argument. You know what? Even I have fallen into this trap. Have you ever heard of groupthink? I have a number of business partners in different fields. And because I like them, like we're friends, it's problematic. I can't lie to you. Because disagreeing with them, it's hard. And you fall into groupthink. Groupthink is whereby someone says something and then everyone like, yeah, that makes sense. That goes along. Whereas when you're dealing with someone that you inherently don't like in the first place, you're much more likely to be disagreeable and then hence get to the truth. I've mentioned in the past, if you're going to set up a business, or a business venture and you want to go into partnership with someone else, always pick someone who shares strengths where you have weaknesses. Why? Because you will sharpen each other and balance each other out. You will sharpen each other and balance each other out. And that's the equivalent of dealing with an enemy. He's not your enemy, but it's the equivalent in this example I'm giving you here. His strengths are your weaknesses. Equally, when you're dealing with friends in a business setting, you're less inclined towards disagreeing with them because you don't want to hurt their feelings. You don't want to upset them. It's much harder to get to the truth of the matter, to find out what's the correct decision, what's the right thing we should do here, guys. Because, you know, people have pride. You don't want to hurt their pride and all the rest of it. It's hard when you're dealing with friends in a business setting. Better to hire people that you have no affiliation with, no friendship with in the first place, if you want to be productive, effective in the workplace. Why depend on a stranger when you have a friend at hand? The problem is that you often do not know your friends as well as you imagine. Friends often agree on things in order to avoid an argument. They cover up their unpleasant qualities so as not to offend each other. They laugh extra hard at each other's jokes. Since honesty rarely strengthens friendship, one more time, honesty rarely strengthens friendship. What's one thing that women are particularly guilty of when their friends ask them, oh, do you think I've put on weight? No, girl, you look beautiful. Baby, he should love you as you are. Honesty doesn't, sorry, let me just quote it correctly. Honesty rarely strengthens, since honesty rarely strengthens friendships, if that girl, that woman wants to say, no, babe, you're looking fat, I can't lie to you. You're looking a bit fat still. You need to lose some weight. Maybe I'm going on a Weight Watchers thing or something. That's going to harm their friendship. But now that sets you up for the following predicament. Since honesty rarely strengthens friendship, you may never know how a friend truly feels. That's the problem. Friends will say that they love your poetry, adore your music, envy your taste in clothes. Maybe they mean it. Often they don't. When you decide to hire a friend, you gradually discover the qualities he or she has kept hidden. Strangely enough, it is your act of kindness that unbalances everything. People want to feel that they deserve their good fortune. Remember what I mentioned at the beginning? Basilius felt that Michael's kind gestures, generous gestures towards him was a burden, just like that plate of food that the neighbor sent over to you is a burden. You have to send it back with more food. You know this. People want to feel as though they, where are we? As though they deserve their good fortune. My bad. People want to feel they deserve their good fortune. The receipt of a favor can become oppressive. It means you have been chosen because you are a friend, not necessarily because you are deserving, not because you have the qualities or the skills or the necessary, I don't know, whatever it is, knowledge required to execute the job. No, someone's doing you a favor because they had pity on you. They felt sorry for you. And that is insulting to your pride. That's the problem in hiring friends. There is almost a touch of condescension in the act of hiring friends that secretly afflicts them. The injury will come out slowly. A little more honesty, flashes of resentment and envy here and there, and before you know it, your friendship fades. The more favors and gifts you supply to revive the friendship, the less gratitude you receive. One more time, for men who are simping on women as well, you can pay attention to this as well. The more favors and gifts you supply to revive the friendship, the less gratitude you receive. Why? It's very simple. It comes down to supply and demand. The greater the supply, the less the demand. The more you are giving, the less it is worth. The more its perceived value goes down. Too much circulation makes the price go down. That's another law of power. We will be getting that in weeks to come. Too much circulation makes the price go down. The more gifts you give, the less worth those gifts have. Even if you're paying more for them, it doesn't matter. Let's have a look at this super chat real quick before we carry on. Melvin Van Dam, appreciate the €5 super chat, my man. Thank you. Narcissists and sociopaths do it naturally. That's exactly how my ex-wife was. I'm not sure what it is, Melvin. Perhaps you can let us know. I'm not sure what it is. Perhaps you sent this earlier on when I was talking about something else. Ingratitude has a long and deep history. It has demonstrated its powers for so many centuries that it is truly amazing that people continue to underestimate them. Better to be wary. If you never expect gratitude from a friend, you will be pleasantly surprised when they do prove grateful. And this is in line with our deen. Give and don't expect a return. Have you ever heard of Al-Mannan? Al-Mannan is the one who gives gifts and then reminds the person of the favors he bestowed upon him. There is a specific punishment with Allah for this. Al-Mannan. Allah says in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى. O you who believe, don't render your good deeds as null and void بالمن, by reminding people what you did for them. Don't do that. Perfectly synchronized with the Sunnah. No contradiction here. Give, and if they're grateful and prove grateful, so much the better. And if they don't, doesn't matter. You did it for the sake of Allah in the first place. But don't bank on it happening. Don't bank on that favor being repaid just because he's a friend. On the contrary, you're more likely to be repaid that favor by an enemy than by a friend. Why? Because the enemy was never expecting this. But the friend was. That's the difference. The friend expects good treatment. The enemy doesn't. Ingratitude has a long and deep history. It has demonstrated its powers for many centuries. That it's truly amazing that people continue to underestimate them. Better to be wary. If you never expect gratitude from a friend, you will be pleasantly surprised when they do prove grateful. The problem with using or hiring friends is that it will inevitably limit your power. The friend is rarely the one who is most able to help you. And in the end, skill and competence are far more important than friendly feelings. You see, the friend might not necessarily be the best qualified person for the job. They might not necessarily be the best qualified person for the job. Michael III had a man right under his nose who would have steered him right and kept him alive. That man was his uncle, Bardas, but he chose Basilius, thinking his friend was there, had his best interests at heart. All working situations require a kind of distance between people. You are trying to work, not make friends. Friendliness, real or false, only obscures that fact. The key to power, then, is the ability to judge who is best able to further your interests in all situations. Keep friends for friendship, but work with the skilled and competent. Your enemies, on the other hand, are an untapped gold mine that you must learn to exploit. When Talleyrand, Napoleon's foreign minister, decided in 1807 that his boss was leading France to ruin and the time had come to turn against him, he understood the dangers of conspiring against the emperor. He needed a partner, a confederate. What friend could he trust in such a project? He chose Joseph Fouché, head of the secret police, his most hated enemy, a man who had even tried to have him assassinated. He knew that their former hatred would create an opportunity for an emotional reconciliation. That emotional reconciliation he is alluding to is, all right, if you've ever been in a toxic relationship and you're constantly fighting and then getting back together, make up, break up, make up, break up, make up, break up. That's the emotional reconciliation. Typically in toxic relationships as well, the intimacy, the physical intimacy tends to be extremely heightened. The feelings, the pleasure tends to be heightened. Why? It's an illusion because you're on a constant emotional roller coaster. So there is an opportunity for emotional reconciliation in this instance here with an enemy from a working perspective. Why? Because the friend on this spectrum expects good treatment. Once again, the enemy is on the other end of the spectrum, does not expect this good treatment, which means he has further to travel. It's a greater experience. It's a bigger high because he's coming from so far back off the spectrum. Do you see an opportunity for emotional reconciliation? He knew that Fouché would expect nothing from him, and in fact would work to prove that he was worthy of Talleyrand's choice. A person who had something to prove will move mountains for you. Remember that. Finally, he knew that his relationship with Fouché would be based on mutual self-interest and would not be contaminated by personal feeling. How can it be contaminated by personal feelings? As I mentioned before, when you're dealing with friends, you have the friendship to worry about. It's not just the business. It's not just the work. It's not just the whatever it is that you're doing. It's the friendship that you must be concerned with afterwards. And the problem is that concern for the friendship leaks into your business dealings, your dealings with the work on the job, and can compromise and will almost definitely compromise your ability to be efficient, productive, successful in whatever it is you're doing. The selection proved perfect. Although the conspirators did not succeed in toppling Napoleon, the union of such powerful but unlikely partners generated much interest in the cause. Opposition to the emperor slowly began to spread. And from then on, Talleyrand and Fouché had a fruitful working relationship. Whenever you can, then, bury the hatchet with an enemy and make a point of putting him in your service. Deba, Jazakallah khair, sister, for a £5 super chat. I appreciate it. For all the backlash, brother, you will only grow and grow. I think being your authentic self is refreshing and much needed in this space. You are a star. Much appreciated, sister. Jazakallah khair. I appreciate this. And thank you for the £5 super chat as well. 449. Shukran. As Lincoln said, you destroy an enemy when you make a friend of him. In 1971, during the Vietnam War, Henry Kissinger was the target of an unsuccessful kidnapping attempt, a conspiracy involving, among others, the renowned anti-war activist priest, the Berrigan brothers, 4 more Catholic priests, and 4 nuns. In private, without informing the Secret Service or the Justice Department, Kissinger arranged a Saturday morning meeting with 3 of the alleged kidnappers, explaining to his guests that he would have most American soldiers out of Vietnam by mid-1972. He completely charmed them. They gave him some Kidnap Kissinger buttons, and one of them remained a friend of his for years, visiting him on several occasions. This was not just a one-time ploy. Kissinger made a policy. By the way, Henry Kissinger is still alive. That man is like 3,000 years old. He was the right-hand man to Nixon. What's his name? Richard Nixon, the U.S. president in 1968 to 1972. That guy, not Nixon, Kissinger's still alive. He's like 98 or something. Man is ancient. He was actually involved in the recent debacle. It's not so recent now, with Theranos and that girl. What's her name? I forget the lady who's now facing a prison sentence potentially. Theranos, the blood sample company I spoke about in my previous live. They gave him some Kidnap Kissinger buttons, and one of them remained a friend of his for years, visiting him on several occasions. This was not just a one-time ploy. Kissinger made a policy of working with those who disagreed with him. One more time. Henry Kissinger made a policy of working with those who disagreed with him. Boy, I could say a whole bunch of things right now. Colleagues commented that he seemed to get along better with his enemies than with his friends. You know, if I'm to look at it at a logical point of view, it's because the relationship with an enemy is not contaminated with the desire to please. It's not. It's not contaminated with the desire to please. It has one purpose in mind. What's the outcome that we're looking to achieve? Period. Super efficient. Super efficient. Without enemies around us, we grow lazy. An enemy at our heels sharpens our wits, keeping us focused and alert. It is, therefore, sometimes better to use enemies as enemies rather than transforming them into friends or allies. Mao Zedong saw conflict as key in his approach to power. Mao Zedong, by the way, was essentially responsible for establishing communism in China. Yeah, he beat the nationalists with an inferior army, with a completely inferior force, through a lot of wit and strategy. We'll get to that later on in the book. Mao Zedong saw conflict as key in his approach to power. In 1937, the Japanese invaded China, interrupting the civil war between Mao's communists and their enemy, the nationalists. Fearing that the Japanese would wipe them out, some communist leaders advocated leaving the nationalists to fight the Japanese and using the time to recuperate. Mao disagreed. The Japanese could not possibly defeat and occupy a vast country like China for long. Once they left, the communists would have grown rusty if they had been out of combat for several years and would be ill prepared to reopen their struggle with the nationalists. To fight a formidable foe like the Japanese, in fact, would be the perfect training for the communist ragtag army. Use an enemy to sharpen yourself. All right, if you guys, if any of you do MMA here, you will know that if you are constantly fighting guys who are multiple weight classes below you or significantly less skilled than you, you don't improve. They do, but you don't. You have to fight someone who's on your level, or better still, better than you, because that's how you become better. I say that because for a long time I was a heavyweight. When I was doing MMA, I've lost a lot of weight now. I've lost a lot of weight because it was unnecessary for me to carry that weight. I no longer did strongman. But when I was competing in strongman, my max weight was 143 kilos. Super, super heavy, man. 143 kilos is around 320 pounds. And whoever I would fight, they would always make the same, even if he was a big guy, they would always make the same comment, and that was, they would say to me, like, your presence is very overwhelming. When you step forward, it's very, you're suffocating. And I understand, man. I weighed 140 kilos, right? I never fought someone who was my weight, ever. I was always the heaviest guy in the room. But that harmed me. Why? Everyone was getting benefit fighting this big lump. And me, I was fighting people who some of them are a lot more skilled than me, don't get me wrong. But my weight, ultimately, weight is super important. It's the whole reason why we have weight classes in fight sport in the first place. Because weight is a big deal, man. Like 143 kilos, I can take you down and just sit on you and squash you. No amount of turtling or whatever jiu-jitsu you think you're going to do is going to get you out of that position. I'm just going to squash you. Did you ever see Brian Shaw, 4 times world's strongest man, grapple with Dustin Poirier? Black belt, jiu-jitsu black belt. Dustin Poirier is about to fight for the title now against Oliveira. Brian Shaw is 6'8" and weighs 420 pounds, which is around 195 kilos. He just literally sat on him. It was hilarious. He sat on him, and Poirier couldn't do nothing. No amount of turtling or, trying to get to the side and take a knee. None of that's working. None of that's working. Force, it's just gravity at the end of the day. It is what it is. Okay. Let me get to this. Let me finish. Okay, let me get to this super chat real quick and then I'll continue. Siham Kadur, I appreciate the 20 euro super chat, sister. Jazakallah khair. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. Siham Kadur. I think the most unsettling thing about these rules is many of them we know but had to learn the hard way. Absolutely. 100%, sister. Look, this is history at the end of the day. I mean, we were talking about Emperor Sung. This is from like 1,000 years ago. This is theirs. They're in the history books. But the problem with history is that if you don't learn your history, guess what? History ends up repeating itself. So yes, sister, absolutely. Right. To fight a formidable foe like the Japanese would be the perfect training for the communist ragtag army. Mao's plan was adopted and it worked. By the time the Japanese finally retreated, the communists had gained the fighting experience that helped them defeat the nationalists. Years later, a Japanese visitor tried to apologize to Mao for his country's invasion of China. Mao interrupted. Should I not thank you instead? Without a worthy opponent, he explained, a man or group cannot grow stronger. Exactly what I was just explaining just now. Mao's strategy of constant conflict has several key components. First, be certain that in the long run you will emerge victorious. Never pick a fight with someone you are not sure you can defeat, as Mao knew the Japanese would be defeated in time. Never pick a fight with someone you are not sure you can defeat. This is very important. Mao was confident that he could defeat the Japanese in time. If you believe that you stand no chance against this individual, don't take the fight in the first place. You have more to lose than to gain. This is very important. It's very important in strategy and war. And, we suffer from this as Muslims a lot as well. We think that we can just pick up sticks and stones and bismillah and just go for it. And I don't want to get too much into that, but if you're going to pick a fight with someone that you are not prepared for, you're not ready for, you don't stand a chance. As we have seen over the past 10 years with all the different rebellions in Libya and Syria and wherever else, when you pick Egypt as well, Algeria once upon a time in the 90s. Never pick a fight with someone you are not sure you can defeat. And I don't want to go too much into that because I understand that's not my area of expertise. That's, I'll leave that to the scholars, inshallah. Right. Second, if you have no apparent enemies, you must sometimes set up a convenient target, even turning a friend into an enemy. Mao used this tactic time and again in politics. Third, use such enemies to define your cause more clearly to the public, even framing it as a struggle of good against evil. People love to feel like there's an enemy that we're fighting against. I was listening to a crypto podcast earlier with Robert Kiyosaki on it, and the one thing he kept on pointing out over and over and over is that I hate the government. I can't stand the government. They're useless. They're hopeless. It's run by academics with PhDs who know nothing about money. They know nothing about money. They're not entrepreneurs. They're not businessmen. They don't get money. They don't understand it. They take our money and then make fiscal policy with our money. And what was very interesting was that he was so enthusiastic about crypto, because crypto, it has been framed as this war against the Fed, this war against currencies being controlled by countries, deregulation of currencies essentially. And that was a very powerful message, and it extended far beyond the intricacies and technical details of crypto itself. It was like a war cry, a battle cry, us against them. Let's take down the Fed. Let's take down regulated currencies that countries have total monopoly over. That's a powerful cry. And by developing an enemy, you can form this message, this very powerful message that will often get people to take action without them even fully understanding what the hell they're fighting for in the first place. Like, I felt like I wanted to buy some crypto after hearing that. And I don't even know too much about crypto. But it's like, yeah, man, that makes sense, man. I'm sick and tired of the Fed printing money and devaluing the value of the pound and the dollar, and then the value of the dollar is tied to so many other currencies. So therefore, if the dollar goes down, many other currencies go down with it. That's a powerful message. Use such enemies to define your cause more clearly to the public, even framing it as a struggle of good against evil. Mao actually encouraged China's disagreements with the Soviet Union and the United States without clear-cut enemies. He believed his people would lose any sense of what Chinese communism meant. A sharply defined enemy is a far stronger argument for your side than all the words you could possibly put together. Never let the presence of enemies upset or distress you. You are far better off with a declared opponent or two than not knowing where your real enemies lie. And you know, I don't want to let you guys too much into my strategies when it comes to social media and stuff like that. But one thing I will tell you is this. You will notice that I don't engage with hate comments or with negative videos made about me at all, pretty much. Why? Secretly, I like it. Secretly, I'm happy about it. Why? Because without having a group of people who are clearly and stand completely against me, my message carries no weight. It means it's a meaningless message. Unless your message is really creating polarizing emotions of love and hate, meaning there will be a group of people who really love you and a group of people who really hate you, you're basically vanilla. Your message is vanilla. You're not standing for much. That's what it means. And whenever I see that, it just reminds me, like, alhamdulillah, okay, I'm doing something right here. Because if I didn't have those people talking like that, making those type of comments, making those type of videos, it would mean that my message is probably meaningless. Never let the presence of enemies upset or distress you. You are far better off with a declared opponent or two than not knowing where your real enemies lie. The man of power welcomes conflict, using enemies to enhance his reputation as a sure-footed fighter who can be relied upon in times of uncertainty. Let's talk about that for a second. When you have an enemy, you are tested. I don't know how many of you have experienced mass hatred on social media before, but the last time I was infamously going viral on YouTube and TikTok, I obviously got a lot of backlash. And one thing one brother said to me was, he said to me, Mahdi, you know, during this period, I have begun to look at you in a different light, and I have a newfound level of respect for you. I said to him, why is that? He said, you've known me for, a period of time. Why now? Why not before? He said, because your response or lack thereof to all of the hate that you've received, that would have been very hard for me to do that. I don't know how you were able to do that. So having a sharply defined enemy allows the people to see your true colors. Are you really about it? Are you really about it? Or are you just a waffler? The only way you will know is once you put a man's feet to the fire. The only way you will know if you are a good fighter is by stepping into the cage, stepping into the ring, and facing the best in the world. You can have all the skills that you like in training. It's meaningless. It means nothing if you can't do it on the stage. When the bright lights are on, everyone's watching. It doesn't matter. The man of power welcomes conflict, using enemies to enhance his reputation as a sure-footed fighter who can be relied upon in times of uncertainty. I know I just read that, I'm reading it again. Rashid Khuzaima, Habibi, for the 10 euro chat. Much appreciate, my brother. Much appreciate. Brothers and sisters, let's financially support Brother Mahdi for the great knowledge he provides us so that his channel can become even more professional. Much appreciated. No, something just dropped there. Much appreciated, Rashid. Wallahi, jazakallah khair, Habibi. Much appreciated. And I'm working on the professional side, inshallah ta'ala. All of this super chats that I received is going back into enhancing the quality. You're going to see. I'm not even going to tell you. You're going to see, inshallah. Don't worry. Right. As I mentioned in last week's podcast, when we studied last week's law, at the end of each law, Robert Greene has two things. He has an image for you to remember so that you can actually visualize something in your mind, and it will help you to remember what that law was. And then he has a reversal, which is an exception to the rule, an instance whereby you should consider not implementing that law. So because there are times when you do need to do the opposite of what he has mentioned. So let's start. The image here is jaws, so like shark jaws. Can you see? Let me see. So even the way it's been written is in jaws, right? The jaws of ingratitude. Knowing what would happen if you put a finger in the mouth of a lion, you would stay clear of it. With friends, you will have no such caution, and if you hire them, they will eat you alive with ingratitude. Authority. Know how to use your enemies for your own profit. You must learn to grab a sword, not by its blade, which would cut you, but by the handle, which allows you to defend yourself. The wise man profits more from his enemies than a fool from his friends. Balthazar Gracian. And finally, for the reversal. Although it's generally best not to mix work with friendship, this is a reversal to the law now. Pay attention. And by the way, if you have any questions, because I'm going to be concluding this live very shortly, if you have any questions, throw them up in a super chat. I will answer super chat questions, inshallah ta'ala. Well, we're nearly finished. Another 2 minutes and we're done. Although it is generally best not to mix work with friendship, there are times when a friend can be used to greater effect than an enemy. A man of power, this is evil, I remember this part, for example, often has dirty work to do that has to be done, but for the sake of appearances, it is generally preferable to have other people do it for him. This comes under the heading of another law. It's called always use a cat's paw, and we'll get to that as time goes along. Don't worry about it. But essentially, it's where you have dirty work to do, but you cannot be the one seen to do it yourself. Think of presidents, prime ministers. They all have dirty work to do, right? But they don't go and fight the damn wars. They get other people to do it for them, right? Right. But for the sake of appearances, it is generally preferable to have other people do it for him. Friends often do this best, since their affection for him makes them willing to take chances. Also, if your plans go awry for some reason, you can use a friend as a convenient scapegoat. This is pure evil now, guys. But now you are learning for the sake of protecting yourself. Protect yourself. Don't allow a friend of yours to convince you to take a risky move on their behalf, and then you're the one who has to take the fall. Let's carry on. The fall of the favorite was a trick often used by kings and sovereigns. They would let their closest friends at court take the fall for a mistake, since the public would not believe that they would deliberately sacrifice a friend for such a purpose. Of course, after you play that card, you have lost your friend forever. It is best then to reserve the scapegoat role for someone who is close to you, but not too close. Finally, the problem about working with friends is that it confuses the boundaries and distances that working requires. But if both partners in the arrangement understand the dangers involved, a friend often can be employed to great effect. You must never let your guard down in such a venture, however. Always be on the lookout for any signs of emotional disturbance, such as envy and ingratitude. Nothing is stable in the realm of power, and even the closest of friends can be transformed into the worst of enemies. And that concludes Law 2. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I hope you enjoyed that. And you know, this happens to me every single week. Every week before I go live, I always prepare in advance, right? I'm going in advance, my notes. What am I going to talk about? Let me tell you something. For those of you who are considering putting out content online on social media, I cannot tell you the amount of times I have had realizations, epiphanies, moments of clarity on the fly whilst I'm delivering. Just now, it happened just now. Whilst I was delivering Law 2, and it was talking about never put too much trust in friends, and the burden of favors that you receive. On the fly, I thought of, oh yeah, when a neighbor gives you a plate of food and then you need to return it, I thought of that on the fly. So for those of you who are considering creating content, you have a skill in something, you're good at something, you've got knowledge that you can share, don't overthink it too much. The amount of times I have had moments of clarity in the heat of a debate, and I managed to trap someone some way because I had a moment of clarity on the fly, on the spot. Sometimes you just got to get into the arena. Go for it. Just do it. It's nerve-wracking, I know, but just go for it, because you get all these realizations when you're in the heat of the moment, when you're actually doing it, and it's really nice. Ilyas Habibi, thank you for another €5 super chat, my man. Have you read the book Art of War? Seen a lot of it? I have, yes, by Sun Tzu. I have read that book. Very good book. You can find it on YouTube. The Art of War is on YouTube, guys, for free. You know, half of these books, the 48 Laws of Power, it's on YouTube. You can find it, and they do take them down every now and again, but you can find them. A lot of them you don't even have to pay for. You don't even have to pay for. You can find 48 Laws of Power on YouTube right now for free. You can listen to it. Why am I doing this? Because I can provide you with additional commentary. I'm going to give you additional commentary. But you can find that book for free right now on YouTube. You want to listen to it all? Go. You don't have to spend a penny. And on that note, I'll bid you all a good evening. Inshallah ta'ala, I will see you guys in a few hours. I'm going to be doing a live tonight, inshallah, for the single Muslim brothers and sisters. Going basically a one-on-one solution session that I charge £200 an hour for. I'm going to do it for free on YouTube here. I'm going to be taking you guys, bringing you one into the stream. You can tell me what you're going through, what your problems are, what are your major stickling points, the major obstacles you're going through. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll discuss and talk about it. And that will be at around 9 p.m. GMT UK time, which is in around 2.5 hours time, there or thereabouts. Okay, I'll see you guys soon. Jazakumullah khair, and thank you to all of you for your generous super chats. Those of you who donated, I much appreciate it. It's going right back into this channel. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.